to go? Hi, good evening, everybody. It's Mayor Shelley Brindle. Thank you for joining our Facebook Live to talk about traffic and in relation to the proposed development on Westfield Place. I'm just going to be just a few seconds while we allow people to log on, and then we'll get started. All right, let's get started. I just want to let everybody know we are going to try and wrap this up by 7 o'clock tonight. So we're going to try and keep this rolling so that we have time for hopefully any questions that you all may be putting in, submitting on the Facebook Live over the next hour or so. So I first want to thank the many residents who have visited the Downtown Preview Center and reached out with their questions regarding 1 Westfield Place. It's been interesting. I've been in there many times, taken many residents through. I sat through and went and visited all 4 ward presentations. And, you know, there's a wide range of opinions on this proposed project, from don't change Westfield at all to how quickly can we get started. So once again, it's a reflection of how much this community cares. And I think it is a unique component of Westfield is how passionate and how much ownership we all feel of our community. It's also what makes it so special. But regardless of where you fall on the spectrum of support, it's important that you hear the facts directly from the experts in order to form your own opinions. Our top priority is for you to have the facts so that your feedback is credible and can better inform the evolution of this project through what has been a robust and continue will be a public input process. To date, it's probably not a surprise, and it's not to us, traffic seems to be the issue of most concern to residents. Other common concerns are related to project scale, the amount of office space, sustainability and open space, and the financials. And to address your concerns specifically, StreetWorks is hosting a series of information sessions with relevant professionals in the preview center, focus on these very specific areas of concern. They're all being recorded and they're going to be uploaded to the website, so if you can't make it in person. But I did want to remind everybody of what's upcoming. The future of office space is at the preview center tomorrow, December 13th at 6 o'clock. Planning and design, a discussion of land use, proposed scale, and overall aesthetics and design is this Thursday, December 15th at 6 o'clock. And one on wellness and sustainability is on next Monday, December 19th at 6 o'clock. So we are also looking to schedule Facebook Lives on each of these subjects, as well as with the town's professionals immediately after the holidays, where there'll be a detailed discussion and sharing of information regarding the proposed financials. But tonight we're discussing traffic. And the purpose is to have our traffic experts share the traffic mitigation and pedestrian safety recommendations that are a result of some comprehensive traffic studies by these traffic engineering professionals and explain their process for how they arrived at them. Just a few points to keep in mind before we begin. Traffic improvements are iterative and plans will adapt to the evolving realities. Please rely on experts and data, not personal experience or social media interpretations of the facts. And I know this when I became mayor. I thought there could be 4-way stops at all these different places and so forth. And I learned that every decision like that is a result of lots of data and actual real information. And so please remember, traffic is complex and solutions are data driven. So sometimes solutions can be counterintuitive to our personal experience, which is why we rely on experts. And you'll be hearing a lot more about that tonight. So in terms of the process, a lot of people have asked, how have you arrived at these? And is it credible? And, you know, isn't the developer just, you know, telling us what we want to hear? In the case of all redevelopment projects, the developer retains a licensed traffic analysis firm, and they conduct a traffic impact study, which is then provided to the town and our traffic consulting firm for review, which we have hired through the escrow of the redevelopment project. Our traffic consultant looks at their impact study, reviews it, provides feedback and input to further refine it and ensure it fully represents the best interests of our residents. I'm joined today by John Federico from WSP on the town's behalf, and I'm going to let him speak a little bit more about that process in a minute. and John Canning from Kimley Horn, who is the engineering firm hired by Streetworks, as well as Carolina Simon, the VP of Development for Streetworks. Many of you might have met her in your visits to the preview center. And if you haven't, please go and introduce yourself. And part of the extensive process in analyzing traffic is ensuring that multiple experts are weighing in and peer reviewing the data. John Federico, who will discuss in detail, we do not just take town traffic data analysis at face value without requests for additional data, providing additional input, and make sure that whatever is ultimately rolled out and recommended reflects the advocacy on behalf of the town and due diligence that's in our best interest. So the latest version of the traffic impact study was posted on the One Westfield Place website, where you can review it in full. We'll also be linking to it from the town website. And this traffic study is also going to be peer reviewed by the Union County Engineering Office, the New Jersey Department of Transportation, and New Jersey Transit. So I just want to assure you that there are lots of eyes looking at this to make sure that the data is legitimate and the recommendations are also credible. So we have also recently posted updated FAQs pertaining not only to the traffic, but also parking and school impact on our website on the town. So please go check that out. So through this evening, you can submit questions, as I mentioned, in the Facebook Live. We have also received several questions in advance, and we've already given them to the traffic professionals, and they're going to try to address them proactively throughout the course of the presentation. So I am now going to hand it over to John Federico, ask him to make a brief introduction, and then he's going to hand it off to John Canning, who's going to take us through the presentation. So with that, John, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mayor. So yeah, my name is John Federico, and I work for, as the Mayor mentioned, a company called WSP. We're a national planning and engineering consulting firm focusing in transportation planning and engineering. My background, I'm a licensed professional planner in New Jersey, also a licensed professional engineer. And so our role as a firm, WSP, we were hired by the town in summer of 2021 to provide on-call traffic review and circulation review services, specifically for redevelopment sites in town. Prior to that, we've worked with the town in a couple different capacities. In 2021, we went through the master plan re-examination effort, focusing on the circulation or transportation plan and updating that for the town, which was adopted in June of 2021. And then prior to that, in 2019, we also worked with the town to develop a bike walk Westfield plan, which was a plan for making biking and walking safer, more accessible throughout the town. So over the last 18 months, myself and a team of planners and engineers here at WSP have been focusing on this project, conducting multiple reviews of the materials that the developer has provided. This includes formal reviews of the traffic report. It also includes a number, dozens of meetings to go through the issues, talk through the assumptions and the models. And we have been providing input and feedback throughout the process, which I'm going to get into in more detail as we get into this tonight. But what I really want to emphasize is with any of these traffic reviews, there's really multiple levels. There's your technical review, where you're looking over the data, making sure the numbers add up, that they're used consistently, that the reports are being, the results are being reported accurately. And that takes a lot of time and effort, and it's essential. But it's also fairly straightforward. I think what's just as important, or perhaps more important, is the review of the big picture assumptions, because this is where everything flows from. So what are the existing traffic volumes, and where do they come from? What's the site generated traffic? What assumptions go into that? What's the split between different modes? Who's going to walk or bike or drive? And how is the model set up? How is this all modeled in the programs? So we spent just as much time, probably more, on those issues, talking internally with the town, with other internal experts at WSP, and then working with the developer on those questions that we've had. And then the final aspect of our review is comparing this against the previous work we've done with the town on the master plan, the bike walk plan, and making sure that these plans are consistent with what the town wants to accomplish through their master planning, and looking for opportunities to forward elements of those plans, recommendations from those plans. Now, in addition to WSP's review, there's another layer on top of that, which the mayor referred to, which is the review by the jurisdictional entities that have jurisdiction over the roadway. So that's NJDOT, and that's Union County, and they're going to be heavily involved as this moves forward. They have their own set standards for what can be done on the roadways. They're certainly interested in keeping traffic flowing. And as almost all of the driveways from this development access either onto a county or a state road, it's ultimately going to have to go through those very strictly defined processes. And we're going to be involved with that as that moves forward as well. So with that, I want to turn it over then, I think, to John to introduce himself, his team, and get a little bit more into the details.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. So like John, I work for a national transportation engineering and planning firm, Kimley Horn. I've been practicing traffic engineering for over 30 years. I've worked on a number of similar projects, TOD projects in the New York City metro area. I've been fortunate to have a very strong team to work with me, Adam Gibson and Lisa Juan, who's helping with the presentation tonight. I agree with what John has said. Traffic engineering, there's a process and standards, and we have to adhere to them. And there's a technical detailed peer review. So we want to make sure that we conform to the standards. And then part of the process is public input once we release the traffic study and the findings to see what we've got right and what we could improve. So Lisa, if we can start the presentation, please. Thank you. So tonight we're here basically to discuss traffic. That's the issue at hand. We're seeking public input. This is the fourth public presentation that we've had. The three others were live. We received a lot of good input from those, and we'll be addressing some of the comments tonight and some of the comments we're still working on. Lisa, if you can advance to the next slide, please. We do want to seek input from you. It's a collaborative process. Next slide, Lisa, please. The purpose of the redevelopment is to repurpose the train station area in order to support the downtown. It presents opportunities to improve the town's transportation infrastructure. It also presents opportunities to provide a healthier downtown environment for a healthier lifestyle. Lisa, thank you. Many of you may know that the town has not had the opportunity to invest significantly in transportation infrastructure over the years, and yet traffic volumes have continued to increase and change. And as a result, you have a lack of equipment at certain locations and antiquated equipment at other locations, so that traffic operating conditions in the downtown are not as efficient and not as safe as they could have been. But the town hasn't been sitting on its hands. It has conducted extensive traffic studies, as John referred to, and has evaluated conditions where there are challenges and where there are opportunities. So this project is going to build on those studies. And one of the recommendations was to have a transit-oriented multi-use development. The benefits of this are you get the support and the investment from a development with less traffic, more walking, and it's more efficient. It allows to provide pedestrian and safety improvements as well as capacity improvements, to update the traffic signal equipment, and to provide an overall safer and more efficient transportation network. Slide, please, Lisa. Thank you. We have to evaluate future traffic operating conditions with and without the proposed development. Identify where there are impacts, identify mitigation measures. This is a collaborative process, as John and the mayor have already referred to. It involves input from the town, from the state, from the county, New Jersey Transit, and just as importantly, from you, the public. We're at the start of the process, and the results that we're presenting to you tonight are preliminary. They will continue to be informed by your professionals, the state and county professionals, and by your public input. What we'd like to begin with tonight is a high-level overview. Traffic studies are very dense. You'll see when you go to the website, there's lots of pages of tables and charts, and it's not very interesting or even engaging. But most of you, when you drive through the intersections in town, will spend less than a minute passing through the various intersections. So we wanted to give you a people scale finding of the results of the traffic study before we get into the specific details. There are three conditions that we're considering before us tonight. The first condition, which is shown in the red bar color on the left side is future conditions in the town if Lord and Taylor were to stay a dormant fallow site. Not something that anybody particularly wants, and not something that the owner of the property is bound to because they have development rights. But that's kind of the baseline condition that we're starting from. The gold condition is the reference standard. As I mentioned previously, the Lord and Taylor building is a 145,000 square foot building. It's an as of right retail use. And so if that building were reoccupied for its permitted purposes, it would add traffic to the street system. So we have to look at future conditions with the owner's rights respected and the building reoccupied. And that's what we compare traffic impacts to. That's the standard. And then in the blue colors, future conditions with the project, with project traffic added, and how traffic operating conditions will prevail. So on the left side of this slide, we show future average traffic volumes at the study area intersections. Basically what we did is we have 17 intersections in the study area. We added all of the traffic volumes from each of the intersection up in the busiest hour, which happened to be the PM peak hour, divided by 17, divided by 60, and you get the average number of vehicles passing through the intersections per minute. So in the future conditions with general background traffic growth, the other 12 or 13 projects in Westfield that have been approved, but Lord and Taylor remaining basically vacant, you'd have an average of 33 vehicles passing through the average intersection per minute. That's up about 3 from current conditions, 31 actually, up about 2 from current conditions. And in the future, with Lord and Taylor reoccupied as 145,000 square foot retail business, that would increase from 33 to 34. So 1 additional trip per minute with the reoccupancy of Lord and Taylor. Then if you take Lord and Taylor offline because it's being replaced by this development, and also add the development proposed for the north side of the railroad by the intersection of North and North Avenue and Central, as well as by the train station, traffic volumes will average 35 vehicles per minute passing through the study intersections. Now, you may not think that's a lot, but with the power of multiplication, if you multiply 35 by 60, you get over 2,000 vehicles per hour on average passing through the study intersection. So that's generally what traffic engineers look at, but you're never going to see over 2,000 vehicles in an hour because you're only going to be at the intersections for a minute plus or minus. So the net increase in traffic, the gold compared to the yellow, is basically on average 1 additional vehicle per minute per intersection. So traffic engineers basically say, what's that going to mean to the average motorist? And we take those volumes, we enter them into a software which compares the number of vehicles on each turning movement to the capacity of each turning movement, depending on the number of lanes and the amount of green time it gets at a traffic signal, and it calculates the average delay. So in the future condition, in the red color, if Lord and Taylor were to remain vacant, the analysis indicates that on average, the delay will be 20 seconds per vehicle per intersection. Some intersections will be more, such as Clark and Prospect at Broad and North Avenue. Some intersections will be less. With Lord and Taylor reoccupied, but no improvements or no investment in traffic improvements, just the existing roadway infrastructure, which is the as of right existing condition, the average delay would increase from 20 to 23 seconds per vehicle. Not humongous, but still a considerable increase. When we add the additional traffic that would be developed or generated by the proposed development and add the proposed mitigation measures and traffic improvements that we're implementing, the overall delay is calculated to decrease from 23 seconds to 19 seconds, or a little below future conditions if Lord and Taylor were to remain vacant. So
Hey,
you can
John,
see, yes,
can I just stop you for a quick second just to clarify a few things?
yes.
So when you mentioned future and you said, and you mentioned other proposed developments, so this takes into account, describe what you mean by that and what future actually means.
Sure. Well, it starts off with background growth. So traffic engineers assume that there will be an increase in the ambient traffic volumes over time because of increased activity in the region. So typically we increase traffic volumes by about 0.75% per year over the life of the project. So from 2020 to 2027 or 2022 to 2027. And then on top of that, we add traffic from other projects in the area that are determined to add significant levels of traffic activity through the study intersections. Lisa, do you happen to have that slide that shows the other developments that we've included? Is that something you can pull up quickly?
Well, while she's looking at, oh,
There
okay,
we
so
go.
these are all, oh, so you looked at all of this.
All of these developments have been included in the traffic study. Part of them have been incorporated from the land use plan because they were included in the traffic projections from that. But all of these projects have been included. And then on top of that, we have an increase in background traffic as well.
Got it. So the new ones, I think what people will be most interested in are, because a lot of these are more recently built and completed, but the Sophia Westfield crossing and the North Avenue project. So so it's important. I think that's important for people to understand. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you. And that's absolutely part of the process. And we
Something-
respect
Got it.
that people would ask questions like that. I'm sorry, go ahead, John.
I was going to say that's something we worked closely with the site owner, with John, to make sure that those were in there, and to work with the town planner and town administrator to make sure we had the right numbers, and then convey that over to make sure it was incorporated into the study.
And John, Federico, you might get into this, but the number of intersections that you all, I know that you weighed in on that from WSP. And so can you talk a little bit about what intersections were determined and why, and what role you played, John, into making that, expanding that?
Sure. And yeah, we were going to get into that in a slide or two, but I
Oh,
think
then you know what? I don't want to know, then hold it, jump in, because I had another question about this chart in particular. So John Canning, the Johns are John C. So John C. So, the average person might look at this second chart and say, how could that be that the blue is actually going to be low, reduces time after the development? It doesn't seem credible. But I think you said something really important. It's the future with the retail occupied Lord & Taylor. Let's just assume that Lord & Taylor is coming back tomorrow. None of the traffic mitigation measures that we're proposing would be able to be implemented. And I do think it's important for the public to understand that there are current existing traffic issues today that we all recognize. All of us can probably identify where the painful intersections are. And we also know what could and should be done about those. But adding traffic lights, I think lights are about $500,000. They're very expensive to implement. So I think one of the big pluses that this ultimately would enable is the town to resolve for some of those challenging intersections that exist today, in addition to addressing whatever may the development bring. So that would explain, am I correct, John C., why the blue line looks better than the gold line?
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll get into that in a little more detail.
Okay,
As
I
the
don't mean to jump ahead.
No,
Okay.
that's fine, but that's the reason.
Okay.
You're getting an investment as part of this project. You get an investment to upgrade the infrastructure to make the existing streets work better and safer.
Got it. Okay, sorry, I'll be quiet now.
Thank you. Okay, next slide, Lisa, please. So what goes into a traffic study? Well, the first thing you have to do is determine the size of the study area. And that depends to a great extent on the size of the project. If you have a little project, you'll have a little study area. If you've got a larger project, you'll have a larger study area. So as part of the process, we worked with WSP to identify the intersections in the area that we thought should be studied. And they suggested that we include a few other intersections. And ultimately, we agreed that these, we believe, are the intersections that will be most affected by the project. The next thing that we typically do is say, well, what time periods do we have to look at? And typically, if you were studying an office development, office is busiest in the morning commuter hour and in the afternoon commuter hour on a weekday. So you would look at those periods. A retail is typically busiest in the afternoon peak hour, in the middle of the day on a Saturday. So typically you would look at those periods. Now, this is a mixed use development. It has retail, it has office, and has residential. So we ultimately settled on studying the weekday AM and PM commute hours, as well as the middle of the day hour on a Saturday. After you've determined your intersections and your time periods, you have to go out and collect data. It has been challenging because of COVID, but it has also presented new opportunities. So we did data collection, but we also went back to what's known as big data, where they track people driving around in their cars via their phones. And we were able to get 2 months of spring data, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and 2 months of fall data, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, pre-COVID, for the study intersections, to get a baseline and establish our existing traffic volumes. So unlike traditional traffic studies where you would only look at 1 day of data, we've got 1 day of data that's then normalized using two months in the spring and 2 months in the fall pre-COVID. After you establish your existing traffic volumes, you've got to project them forward to the future, which we've talked about a little before. You take your existing traffic volumes, you grow them typically by about 0.75% per year to your design year to reflect ambient increases in project traffic, typically from projects that would be outside of the study area. And then you add to that traffic volumes from other projects in the area that will substantially increase traffic, the various projects that we showed on the slide previously. And in this instance, you'd also add traffic from Lord and Taylor because it's an existing use that's not fully occupied at the moment. After that, we have to establish how much traffic our project would generate, which I'll get into in detail. Basically, there's industry data for the various uses. You look at the type of use and the size of the use, and you establish how much traffic that use will generate, and then the other uses, and you assign these volumes to the study area intersections. So once we build up the future traffic volumes with and without the project, we compare them to the intersection capacities using what's known as synchro software. It's based on decades of research. It compares the turning movement volumes to the capacity of the movements based on the lane groups, whether there's parking, whether there's pedestrians, how much green time you get, the slope of the approach, and various other factors. When we do this, we find out the average delay per vehicle per intersection, as well as the average delay on the individual movements. We compare the results of future conditions without the project to future conditions with the project, and where we determine there's a significant increase in delay, we look to find measures to improve operating conditions and restore them to pre-build conditions. Mitigation measures in this instance run the gamut. They include installation of traffic signals, installation of signal coordination, so that if you're coming down Broad Street and you get to Mountain and Central, once you get through that, you don't get stuck at Elm, which I think is the next intersection. You want to have a smooth progression, not a rapid progression, but a smooth progression through the intersections. Then we prepare our written report to explain what we did and publish it and issue it to the various reviewing agencies, and they will do a critical peer review, and where there are issues, they'll ask us to make changes and corrections. And ultimately, at the end of the process, we'll have a reasonably accurate projection of future conditions and how they will be better or not, depending on the project. And the reviewing agencies will then make their decision based on the results of the traffic study.
John, can you talk a little bit about the peak, how peak is measured? And in this case, can you define the peak hours for folks?
Sure. There are broad fluctuations throughout the day as to the level of traffic activity. Some of us have different schedules than others, but generally speaking, traffic peaks in the morning between about 8 and 9 as people are leaving and arriving at work, and then it peaks in the afternoon from 5 to 6 or 4:30 to 5:30 as people are leaving and heading home. And then on the weekends, there's a typical 1 hour peak somewhere in the middle of the day between usually 11 and 3. In this instance, we looked at data from New Jersey DOT for the area roadways, for a number of area roadways, and we found that the peak hour in the morning was, as we expected, in the 7 to 9 period, in this 7:30 to 8:30 period. And then in the afternoon, we found it was in the 4:30 to 5:30 period. We did compare it to school hour traffic volumes, which are a little bit earlier, typically around the 3 to 4 period, and we found that the 5 to 6 or 4:30 to 5:30 period was higher. Also, importantly, one of the largest components of this project is an office development, and office developments typically generate the most traffic volume in the commuter hour, so 4:30 to 5:30 or 7:30 to 8:30. So they match up well with the busiest hours, and that's why we selected those periods.
All right, I think this might be a good time for me to interject with some of the town's thoughts on this process, because John has kind of talked about where the traffic study stands now, but it's definitely evolved over the 18 months that we discussed. And a lot of that was back and forth in this review process. And I think I can use this slide and these bullets to talk about where some of that occurred. And Shelley, this is what you mentioned earlier. The study area was largely defined through that master planning effort. We had a downtown traffic model, which some of you might be aware of. So that was really the starting point for this, knowing that this was a large scale project affecting a lot of intersections, but that model didn't really include all of the points that would need to be modeled or analyzed. So layering on top of that needed to be the driveway points. All the access points to and from the development needed to be added as nodes. But specifically, we know from earlier work that it's really important to take a close look at the immediate West Zone site right near North and Clark. And so the original versions of the study did not have North and Clark or Clark and Ferris in the model. And we came back and said, those really just need to be in there. And so those were added due to that. Same thing with analysis time periods. It started off as a kind of an AM, PM look at this study because a lot of the development was office. But we thought that it's important to know how this operates on weekends as well. So we had them go back and collect weekend data and put that together and do a weekend analysis that wasn't in kind of the original analysis. And as John just mentioned, knowing that schools are concerned and operations during school periods, we asked them to go back and look at specifically historic data and make sure and confirm that those peaks are occurring when they say they're occurring, from 4:30 to 5:30. Background volume development, I already mentioned, worked closely to get all of the approved developments, known approved developments in town, incorporated into the background growth. We also, in terms of the data analysis, the data results and the intersection analysis, wanted to make sure that it was legible, that it was like you could take this information and understand it to some extent when you're looking at the report. So there's a lot of manipulation of the tables and making sure that the tables were clearly showing the metrics that we need to see to evaluate each approach over not just the overall intersection, but approach by approach and how they were operating and functioning, and comparing against the no build, the build, the Lord and Taylor scenario, and different mitigation alternatives, so that it was understandable. And then finally, the last bullet, the mitigations. There's been a lot of back and forth. There were some initial mitigation ideas, but then we have a lot of background on the circulation plan and the bike walk plan. We wanted to make sure that those recommendations were incorporated into these mitigations. So we had a lot of comments on what could be done to strengthen some of those mitigations, and John's going to speak to some of those, like North and Elm, how that intersection lines up, bicycle pedestrian facilities near the roundabout and in other areas. And also going back to the analysis, making sure that things are looked at not just on an intersection basis, but also as a corridor and how it functions as a corridor, specifically for North Avenue and South Avenue. So we asked them to look at those not only on an intersection basis, but also as a corridor. So anyway, I just wanted to really kind of hammer that home, some of the back and forth that we've had over this process.
Thank you, John. So this is a transit-oriented development. And typically, a transit-oriented development is a development that's located within walking distance of a train station. So on the slide here, you can see the green circle, which represents a 5-minute walk from the Westfield train station. And pretty much all of the parcels that are the subject of this application are within a 1/4-mile walk of the train station, or of a 5-minute walk. In addition, transit-oriented developments are typically close to downtown areas, because downtown areas are typically close to train stations, and the same is true in this application. So the downtown is also very walkable from the proposed development, and very bikeable as well. Next slide, please, Lisa. So this slide is intended to show how the benefits of transit-oriented development are reflected in traffic studies. The purple bars are office parks that would be located in a non-transit location. So right off the parkway with no bus service and no pedestrian sidewalks, just cars. And the green represents a dense multi-use office development, such as a TOD office development located close to a train station. And what the slide shows is that the green TOD office development generates 45% less traffic than a general suburban office development. We have presented this slide.
John,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt you. I think this was some of the slides that caused a little bit of confusion during our sessions.
Yep.
So just to clarify that this slide is just the trip generation, the source is coming from the Institute of Traffic Engineers and from their trip generation manual. This is not the measure of our development. So just wanted to clarify for folks.
Okay, so there was some discussion on this, and we took it up and we rechecked the numbers. And one of the interesting things that we found when we looked at the purple data, 90% of it was taken before 2009, the start of the Great Recession, and 80% of the green data was taken after 2009 or after the Great Recession. And there has been quite the transformation in traffic generation at office buildings pre and post the Great Recession. After the Great Recession, there was much more flexibility in work times. You didn't have to be there at 8:30 and leave at 5:30. You had the ability to arrive earlier, later. And based on the data we have, we can see that this has played a part in showing a difference between the trip generation for office development in an urban transit scarce environment versus office development in a transit rich environment. We rechecked with the town and confirmed that we used the appropriate trip generation rates. And we also checked the transit ridership, carpooling, and the like at the trip generation, and determined that for Hudson County and for this development, approximately 70% of the office workers are expected to drive, and approximately 30% are expected to either take the train, walk or bike, or carpool. Next slide, Lisa, please. Fortunately, the town of Westfield has a very strong pedestrian infrastructure already. There are some locations that there are challenges, but for the large part, sidewalks are present, the roads are flat, there's a good connective network. There are some challenges getting under the railroad at a couple of locations, and then there are safety issues where it's hard to cross some of the busier streets. But importantly, the residents of Westfield have in the PED, the walk and bike plan that the town undertook, expressed an interest in walking and biking. So this chart is taken from that study, and on the left side is walkers. So the red bar is daily walkers and the gold bar is walkers a few days a week. And you can see between the two of them, more than 70% of those who responded to the survey indicated that they walk or walk in Westfield either daily or a few times a week.
Hey, John, I'm sorry, does this mean walk anywhere? Or just I go out for a stroll, I walk my dogs, I walk into town? Like, is there a qualifier for that?
There is not a qualifier. The question is as it's presented at the top of the chart. So it could be I'm going for a walk, I want to be healthy, or it could be I'm going for a walk, I want to get my haircut in town.
I think Mayor Brindle and John, what's in combination with the previous slide, and just to drive the point home, is for folks that were a part of our traffic sessions this past couple of weeks, the assumption that the team has made considers that 70% of office workers will drive to the office where they are located. And that is very important because in association with this slide, what John and the team is really communicating here is that because you have such a beautiful walkable community, which is evidenced by how people have responded to some of this, and granted, this is a very generic question, all the elements that compose a transit-oriented development, the proximity to transit, the walkability associated with your beautiful neighborhoods, and the fact that we will have ample amounts of parking, etc., all combined makes the team, as well as the Institute of Traffic Engineers, very, very comfortable with the figures and assumptions that they have used here.
And not to dwell on this too long, but I'd like to go back a slide and really hit on this, because when I saw that slide for the first time, we were like, that doesn't make a lot of sense, and that's not what we reviewed, and that's not what we remember reviewing and being in the report. And it really took some digging and thinking on our end to see how that 45% related to what you just mentioned, the 70%. And in digging into this, it really is that it's not an apples and apples comparison, and it goes back to the years of the data. and comparing the suburban, which is an earlier year, to the TOD and multi-use, that's a later year. And not only, I think this is the important point that really hammered it home to me and others at WSP, was it's not just the reduction, the 45% reduction. It's not just due to the change in mode to transit, but it's also the timing of it and how much is happening during the peak hours. So that later data may have similar trips, but they're spread out over different hours of the day because of that changes in flex time and flexibility in arriving to the office. So you're losing trips to transit with the 45, but you're also losing some of that spread because it's just a different data set. So what we were most concerned with is, let's see what's going to the study right now, what's actually being used to run the numbers. Let's not look into this historical comparison. And what we see is the 70%. Now that's clear when we go to the ITE platform and we look at what's going to transit, walking and biking, and what's going to driving. Is that more like 70 to 75 to 25 to 30% split. So
that are driving.
yes, the driving is the 70%. Yeah.
Thank you. So in addition to reducing the amount of traffic that's generated per square foot, TOD has other benefits. It puts employees in offices closer to your downtown to support your downtown, particularly during the lunch hour, but also in the after work periods. So this provides for a more sustainable downtown, which in turn results in increased property values. TOD also allows the investment in infrastructure that will make for safer walking and driving and provide for more healthy modal choices and opportunities. So overall, TOD is a more sustainable development from both a traffic, pollution, safety perspective. So one of the critical elements in determining what goes into a TOD is the use components. So the proposed development consists of 3 uses: office, residential, and retail, and they've been selected to carefully consider their benefits and impacts on the downtown. One of the more significant from a traffic perspectives components is the office component. There will be approximately 210,000 square feet of office space over on the existing municipal garages in the south zone by the train station. There will also be approximately 100,000 square feet of office space in the former Lord and Taylor building, which I'm told is ideally suited to conversion from retail to office. Then in addition to that, there will be a substantial amount of the residential program located on either side of the Lord and Taylor building. I think there's probably close to 230 units over there, 2/3 of which will be age restricted. And one of the benefits of age restricted development is that the residents generally, as a rule, do not have children, so they don't have to drive their kids to school or to dance recital or to sports or to band practice or to any of the activities that parents typically take their kids to by car these days. And sometimes in these age-restricted communities, some of the residents are retired or semi-retired, so they don't drive as much, or they don't have to drive during the peak hours. It's also worthy to note that 15% of the residential units will be affordable, so that will support workforce housing. And there's also a small residential component in the north zone up to the right, top right there, where it says loft, residence, and retail. And then the retail component of this development has been also carefully selected and sized so as not to compete with the downtown. Its intent really is to invigorate the street frontages along which the retail is located. So in front of the Lord and Taylor building, and then in front of the mass timber office building in the south zone by the train station, with a small amount of retail up by the loft residence in the north zone. Next slide, Lisa, please. Again, we're looking at at your perspective, what you will see traveling through the intersections. When you drive through town, it'll take you probably a minute to get through the intersections on average. So we looked at the trip projections per hour, divided them by 60, and looked at how much traffic would be added at the various zones. So if you look at the Lord and Taylor zone, the west zone, on average, that's going to generate 3 new trips per minute. entering and exiting at that location, and then they'll distribute through the area intersections in the study area. If you multiply 3 by 60, you can see it's almost 200 trips per minute. So it's not a small amount, but it's on a person scale, it's really not that significant. If you go to the south zone where the office and a small amount of retail is, it's an additional 4 new trips per minute. Multiply that by 60 is 240, 250 trips per hour. And then in the north zone, it's approximately 1 new trip per minute.
And
In total,
John,
that's, yep.
sorry, John, if you explain for folks that these are your outputs, right? But they will be influenced by the delays, will be influenced by the traffic mitigations, right? So there's no
Yes.
doubt that there are trips being added. Can you
Yep.
talk a little bit about that, John?
Sure. So there's no question that there's traffic being added, and if you add these up, 3, 1, and 4, it's an average of 8 trips per minute during the PM peak hour, which is the busiest of the peak hours. But there's a couple of other factors at play. Number one, just as a point of reference, we looked at the trip generation associated with the existing municipal lots on the north side and on the south side of the train station. So on the south side of the train station, the municipal lots, including drop-off and pickup activity, generate on average today well, I should say COVID adjusted, because we did adjust our existing volumes to pre-COVID, on average 4 trips per minute. So about the same as what is proposed to be generated by the south zone. So the south zone will be 4 trips on top of 4 trips, but I'll get to that in a little bit as well. On the north zone, the parking at that location, plus drop off and pick up activity, plus the traffic that's generated by the small amount of private commercial development up there, averaged 3.5 trips per minute on average during the peak hour. It's proposed as part of the project to consolidate commuter parking into 2 parking structures with some surface parking. One of them by the train station you can see there, and then one of them on the top right. In doing this, it's proposed to better balance station parking. Right now, a substantial majority of the commuter parking is located on the south side of the train station. And so if the north side is full, a lot of people from the north side have to travel down under the tracks to get to the south side. So it's proposed to better balance that. And as a result, approximately 1 trip per minute will be transferred from the south side of the train station to the north side of the train station. The other factor to remember, Lisa, if you can hit the next slide, is that Lord and Taylor itself, if it were reoccupied for retail purposes, would add 4 new trips per minute to the roadway system. So that potential use is being eliminated. And if you take that from the 8 trips per minute that the entire project would generate, the net increase is only 4 trips per minute. Which
Hey,
would
John,
be
John, can I just
Yes.
get a clarification? When you all looked at your peak time, is that a Monday through Friday scenario of traffic?
Typically these days it's Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. What we have found is that commuter traffic volumes are considerably lower on Monday and Friday, because when people have the opportunity to work from home, as they do, they often do it on Monday and Friday. It's just more convenient for them. So you get higher
Yeah.
traffic volumes Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Right, and so that's actually consistent with what we're finding in terms of our parking and what's happening at our train station. So the question, I'm sorry, if you go back 1 slide, Lisa, you go back to the previous slide. So when you say 8 new trips per minute during the PM peak hour, we're really talking about 3 days a week, technically, most likely, because you're not going to see that same volume 5 days.
That's
because Mondays and Fridays. Okay, so
there will be
I
less on the other days. Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure what we're talking about, we're really talking about the maximum is going to be 3 days, 3 days a week.
The numbers that the team is showing here, Mayor Brindle, are all based on the peak times, because that's the most conservative approach to looking at data.
Yeah, and that's and I'm sorry, just one other thing too. You had mentioned you mentioned pre-COVID. So the baseline that you're using in many cases is pre-COVID, which is probably when it's added, was higher than it is today. But I just wanted to make sure we are very clear that
that's correct. We made sure made sure that the traffic volumes we're using are representative of what we expect future traffic operating conditions will be after we recover from COVID. So we have made adjustments to account for the fact that COVID drove the numbers way down. And while they're coming back, they're not quite back to where we typically would expect them to be.
And I would add that because of COVID, the team has significantly expanded their data inputs, because in traditionally traffic consultants, John, and you can speak this much better than I can, but traditionally traffic consultants will measure these things based on a 1 day per week versus 2 months. And John, if you can speak a little bit more about that, that would be helpful.
So yes, typically traffic engineers, as I said previous, collect data on 1 day. But when we had to account for COVID, we went back to a company called Streetlight Data that aggregates personal travel based on your phone and when it pings and it travels by cell towers. And we got 2 months of data, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the fall of 2019, and 2 months of data in the spring of 2019. So the data we're using is not just a snapshot of 1 day, it's an average of pre-COVID conditions for 4 months of data in the middle of the week.
And I would just add, in full transparency, that is the case for most of the data. I'd say the majority of the intersections. There were, because this was an evolving process, there were some intersections that were added to the model. And some of that did use not middle of COVID data, but more recent data. But then I think, John, as you mentioned, we made sure that that was calibrated to bring it up to a full traffic level.
Yep. Thank you, John. So these are the study intersections that we looked at, 17 in all. We also studied the site driveways, but just to keep it simple, we focus on the key intersections because the driveways delays are typically confined to the residents and they're of lesser concern. They're in the traffic study for everybody to look at, up and down North Avenue, up and down Central Avenue, and up and down Broad Street. And then we show the development parcels are highlighted here to provide some context. Just a quick reminder, on one of the early slides, we talked about the average traffic number of vehicles passing through the intersection in the average minute of the peak hour. Existing conditions are about 31, future conditions with a vacant Lord and Taylor are about 33, future conditions with Lord and Taylor reoccupied are 34, and future conditions with the proposed project are 35. That's a net increase from A to B, which is basically comparing the project's impact of 2.9%. So I think it's important to put this in context. We're acknowledging without doubt that there will be an increase in traffic, but it's not an order of magnitude or overwhelming increase. It's a modest increase, and we've studied its impacts. We've identified that there are potential impacts, and we've also identified mitigation measures. Thanks, Lisa. So we've proposed traffic improvement measures at 12 of the 17 intersections. These improvements include capacity increasing measures, traffic safety measures, measures to improve the pedestrian environment, as well as measures to improve the cycling environment. And we'll walk you through some of the key ones in the following slides. This is the intersection of Clark Street with North Avenue. Today, it's an unsignalized intersection. And because of that, vehicles exiting Clark Street have to wait for an extended period during the peak hours for a gap in traffic to occur on North Avenue before they can turn out, particularly make a turn to the left. As a result, you get very lengthy delays on Clark Street, waiting to get onto North Avenue. It's also very difficult for pedestrians to cross North Avenue at this location because in addition to waiting for a gap in the traffic on North Avenue, when they're crossing, then they have to make sure that somebody isn't turning out of Clark Street and is super anxious to get out onto North Avenue because they've been waiting for a long time as well.
So John, pause here for a moment. So just for to anticipate what's coming, now John is going to walk us through some of the majority actually of the intersections that we will be mitigating. And just to remind everybody on what the 3 bars represent on the chart here is the bar that is red or orange, if you're a little colorblind, the bar that is red represents what would happen in the future, and the future is the year of 2027, of keeping the Lord and Taylor site exactly where it is without any sort of improvement or mitigation throughout town. The second bar shows, well, if we as property owners decided to reinstate a retail presence within the confines of the existing building today, which is about 143,000 square feet, what would that do? And that would generate in the future, in 2027, the delay that you see here on the screen. And then finally, the blue bar projects and says, with the entire development and with the mitigations that the team is proposing here, considering all of the pipeline that we just outlined and all future developments, because of the traffic improvement and mitigations, we will be able to significantly improve the delay in comparison to not doing anything and just letting the site be as it is today.
Thank you,
Keep
Carolina.
John, I think it's also important to clarify what those bars mean in terms of average delay, whether it's the whole intersection or by specific approach, and how that works with the signalized intersection, because there's some questions on that too.
I will. So the proposed mitigation measure at this location is to install a traffic signal. A traffic signal will accomplish two primary goals. First of all, it will allow you to exit Clark Street in a safer manner. You'll get guaranteed access. You'll no longer have to hope that the gap you're accepting is long enough. The second safety improvement is it will allow you to cross North Avenue and not have to compete with North Avenue traffic. You can cross when the Clark Street approach is moving, and traffic exiting Clark Street will be going slower, and they won't be as frustrated trying to get out onto North Avenue. So that's a significant improvement. It's also proposed to modify the curb returns to shorten the pedestrian crossing area. So with those improvements, the average delay will be changed in a number of ways. First of all, traffic today on North Avenue has little or no delay. If you're traveling eastbound and have to make a left turn, you might have to yield to westbound traffic, but generally speaking, little or no delay on North Avenue. But the delays on Clark Street are pretty extensive, and the analysis indicates that if Lord and Taylor were reoccupied, it would add a substantial amount of traffic at this location. There would be no mitigation, and the delay on Clark Street would be driven up from 37 seconds to 56 seconds. With the implementation of a traffic signal and the safety improvements attendant thereto, the overall delay for the intersection will go to 17.9 seconds. So that means that the delay on Clark Street will probably come down from 55 seconds to maybe 45 seconds, but you'll be guaranteed access. And then the delay on North Avenue will be increased from almost nothing to probably 10 seconds on average. So the overall delay is 17.9 seconds. This can be improved with signal coordination, which is something that we're also proposing, but also one of the attendant benefits of the traffic signal is the safety benefits, and it allows for the signal to function, the intersection to function efficiently, but more importantly, more safely.
Hey, John F., remind me, is this one of the intersections that the town insisted upon review and mitigation? Was this the one we added?
This is one that we added, yes, for analysis that wasn't there originally.
And so, and this is a role, I think, the council I know is insistent upon adding this one, and John, and obviously the improvement is real. And I do think it's important, I always hear from people about how much we miss the Lord and Taylor, and count me in that crew as well. But it's important to note, if we announced, we know that's not happening, but if the Lord and Taylor was returning tomorrow, it's the yellow bar that we would be experiencing, and because it would happen without many of these traffic mitigation measures that are being proposed, as it was pre-COVID.
Correct.
I think it's also important to point out two quick things. First of all, this was also an intersection that was raised in the bike walk plan as targeted for pedestrian improvements. And secondly, that inherently, when you're looking at these type of mitigations, there are trade-offs. So as John mentioned, you're going to probably see with this mitigation a little bit of increase in delay on north, because you've got a traffic signal that isn't there in the existing condition. But the benefits of reducing the queues and the congestion on Clark Street, along with the safety part of people not having to find those gaps and try to get out into a traffic flow, that's kind of dangerous, having a light or a signal to do that at are the things that we weigh when we're looking at mitigations.
And John, I'm glad you brought that up because, you know, we're talking a lot about cars and traffic, but the pedestrian safety is as an equally top priority. And I think a lot of people may not think about it, but it's obvious when you consider it, is shortening the pedestrian crosswalks, like what's happening here. The less time the pedestrians are in the street, the more safe they're going to become. So things like that look small, but they're really significant in terms of what it can do to enhance pedestrian safety. So
And I would add vehicle safety to that too for people driving, because the fact is a lot of the people are driving through these intersections, and you don't want to take extra time. You also don't want to get in a car crash. That's even worse, right? So I think making sure that people can drive safely around Westfield and aren't putting their lives at risk at these places is just as important. So when we look at this, we look at delay in operations, but we also want to create a safe roadway environment where people can make turns and get around town without having to risk their life to do that.
And it also improves the pedestrian connectivity. There may be people who could come down Clark now and would want to go south under the bridge, but it's like, oh, it's too much of a hassle to get there. Now they can come down and cross under signal control and go down. And you'll see this at other locations as well. These will strengthen the connections of the existing pedestrian infrastructure. The next location is the intersection of East Broad and Prospect. It's a similar condition. It's an unsignalized condition now. There's lengthy delays on Prospect Street, and also pedestrians crossing East Broad have to wait for a gap in traffic on East Broad and then cross and hope that they're not in conflict with people turning off of Prospect Street. So similar improvements at this location. It's proposed to install a traffic signal and curb bump outs, and you can see the analysis indicates that there are lengthy delays on Prospect Street now trying to access Broad, and the overall intersection delay will be reduced significantly, because the delays on Prospect Street will probably go down from 147 seconds to the order of 30 or 40 seconds. And then delays on East Broad Street will be minimized by signal coordination. And the details of this on specific movements and time of day are provided in the detailed traffic study in the tables.
And this is just to add on, this is another example of, this is also a safety improvement with people trying to cross the road there and not being able to have gaps, cars blocking the crosswalk as they turned out of Prospect onto Broad, cars just trying to turn onto the street. We saw a lot of safety issues. I also kind of want to note that during the master planning effort, we analyzed that crash data. We mapped those crashes and we identified issues where there were safety locations for all modes. So that was part of this effort, was trying to develop mitigations that would address those safety concerns.
Thank you, John. The next location, probably the most infamous intersection in town, if not in the county, is Elm Street's intersection with North Avenue, where you have Elm Street is offset from the entrance to the train station, and it's also offset from the exit from the train station, so that when you turn out from the train station, you're in conflict with vehicles turning left out of Elm Street, and pedestrians are thrown into the mix for good measure. And the stop line on North Avenue is down at the left of the page, so you have an extra long clearance interval, which loses efficiency to allow the signals to change from red to green on the various streets. So not only was this looked at by the town, but we've looked at it hard as well. And our conclusion was that the only way to make this intersection work is to make it a standard four-way intersection where motorists understand what to expect when they come to it. So on this slide, you can see that the entrance to the train station lines up pretty well opposite Elm Street. We have still to tweak it a little bit more. We're looking at if we can align it slightly better. With that, you can move the stop line in the eastbound direction all the way from the left of the page up to the intersection, so you can have a standard clearance interval of 2 seconds, all red. We're also proposing to install a new traffic signal, new pedestrian signal equipment, and at all of the intersections close to the train station, we're proposing what's known as a lead pedestrian interval. A lead pedestrian interval eliminates the situation where if you're at a corner of an intersection waiting for the light to change for you to cross, and there's a car in the lane next to you waiting for the light to change so they can turn, when the light turns green, there isn't a race between you and the car as to who gets into the crosswalk first. Basically, what will happen is before the light goes green on the street next to you, you'll get a walk indication, and the pedestrian will have an opportunity 3 or 4 seconds to step out into the crosswalk and establish their presence, and therefore the person that's waiting to turn will just have to wait. So these lead pedestrian intervals have been shown to be very effective at improving pedestrian safety, and it's a feature that we're proposing at all of the intersections close to the train station. With these measures, the overall delay is projected to increase in the middle there from 14.3 to 14.5 seconds. I've said it before, I'll say it again, these analyses are preliminary. They will probably change a little bit, but overall the takeaway from this slide is that with these significant safety improvements, this intersection can operate with generally the same level of delay as it does today. So from a delay perspective, there's no impact, but from a safety perspective, there'd be significant improvement. There's also
John,
proposed
I think the one thing that you would achieve universal consensus on in town is that intersection as it sits today is a disaster.
Yes, and we're
I
going
also
to
like
fix
to
that.
remind everybody it's a state road. And it's like, they did that. It's a disaster and very unsafe.
Next slide, Lisa, please. So this is the intersection of North Avenue with Central Avenue. It's a busy intersection, and we have looked at what opportunities there may be to improve the carrying capacity of the intersection. The easiest way would be to add lanes, but adding lanes is difficult when you have limited real estate. We've looked at what the impacts of the project traffic are. We did note when we were out there that there are no pedestrian signals, so it's a safety issue today for pedestrians to cross. Based on our analysis, and this is what's in the traffic study, and we're looking for public input on this, we have determined that the proposed increase in delay with the improvements at this intersection, where it indicates the delay will increase from 34 to 38 seconds, are worth the benefit of the safety improvements, which include installing pedestrian signals, upgrading the ADA crosswalk ramps, and installing high visibility pedestrian crosswalks. We're
Hey, John,
still
can you
looking.
just describe, I'm sorry, when you say pedestrian signals, a lot of people might not realize what that means. Can you describe what a pedestrian
Sure.
signal? They think it's just pushing the button and it goes, like it's more than that.
Well, it's more than that, and these will be APS, audible pedestrian signals for both those who have good vision and those who are sight impaired. So the buttons issue a click so that you can, if you can't see them, you can hear them. And when you press the button, it tells you to wait, and then when the light changes, it tells you in which direction to cross the street. For those who are able to see, you'll have a clear indication as to when you walk and when you shouldn't walk. They'll also have countdown signals to tell you you better hurry up to finish your crossing or don't start at all. So those are the pedestrian improvements. It's push buttons, signals, the signal indications, and the audible pedestrian component of it, so that if you're sight impaired, you'll have a much safer crossing environment. You'll know which street is going at the time and when you should cross. And then the high visibility pedestrian crosswalks, having the stripes on the crosswalks has been shown to make them much more visible to the motorists. They've done studies that determine that just the straight lines, which I believe is what you have now, kind of disappear when you're down the street and driving towards the intersection.
And John, this is one of those intersections in which we have not been able to manage to decrease the delay in comparison to a fully functional Lord and Taylor site. But can you speak a little bit as to our process and how we will evolve, and we will do every measure we can to further improve on that?
Sure. So this is a state intersection. We're going to be coordinating with the state. We'll be looking to install new traffic signal controller equipment so that it can communicate with the intersections to the east and west, which will allow improved progression, so that if I am traveling eastbound and I get through Elm Street on a green light, I should get through Central Avenue on a green light without having to stop. It will also provide improved actuation. We can have actuation on more than just the side street approaches. Cameras are the new technology, and they can look down and identify whether vehicles are waiting to turn. There's also the possibility of adaptive traffic signal control, which is the latest technology. I was talking with the project owner today, and that's something that they're willing to consider. And all of this will be discussed with the New Jersey Department of Transportation.
Even though, can we go back for a moment? So even though this is not a conversation about traffic, but folks will notice the little note on the screen that says proposed site driveway. If you remember the realignment of North and Elm Street, that will be one of the main access to the new public garage on the north side. However, this garage will have two main zones of access. One is through the corner of Elm and North, or it's not a corner, it's just a T intersection. And the other one is the little note that you see here. Can you speak a little bit about that, John?
Sure. This is a probably 200-foot long driveway. It's a two-way driveway that will allow you to travel into and out of the proposed parking garage, which is just below the proposed new loft building, which is shown in the center of the screen on the bottom. It will permit right turns in only and right turns out only. It's unlikely, and we would not recommend that the state will allow left turns in or left turns out, because it's a busy location next to a signalized intersection. But if you're coming from the east and you don't want to pass through the train station drop-off area, you can just continue eastbound on North Avenue, make a right turn into the driveway and proceed to the parking garage. And if you live to the northwest or even to the south and you want to travel home in the evening, you can exit via this driveway and just make a right turn and continue to your destination.
Can you speak to, because I know this is definitely a challenging location, and this is something that when reviewing it, we get, we recognize this is a challenging area. But with that new driveway, the assumption, right, is that most of the traffic will be using the improved intersection at Elm and North, particularly because there'll be a signal there. You'll be able to make a left out at that location. So this driveway will serve some people for very specific purposes, but you're not anticipating that the majority of traffic will be using that driveway, correct?
Correct.
And it's once again, it's something that's going to have to go through a review process with DOT, because it's it's along their road and it's so close to that intersection.
Yep, absolutely.
Evolving.
The good thing about this, John, is that there is a great degree of stacking potentially. Let's just say that the town is hosting a U2 concert and everybody's leaving at the same time, then there is a great amount of stacking and vehicles queuing that can happen and not hitting the road at all, correct?
Within
Correct.
the site, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So the next slide shows a little bit about the bicycle improvements. One of the recommendations, or one of the challenges identified by the walk bike study that the town conducted, was that the existing 8-foot underpass, pedestrian and bicycle underpass under the railroad, was not particularly comfortable or wide enough to comfortably accommodate both pedestrians and cyclists at the same time. And the recommendation was that it be widened from 8 feet to 14 feet. So it is proposed to widen it and to improve the connections to the existing sidewalks and bike trails at that location. We're also going to work with New Jersey DOT to look at the roundabout. I know they made some changes to that location about 8-10 years ago. We want to confirm with them that they're satisfied. We've had identified that the southbound approach from under the railroad onto the roundabout is problematic from a safety perspective. We'd like to discuss that with them. And we'd also like to discuss the connectivity, pedestrian connectivity across the roundabout, or particularly across the west side of the roundabout. There's a traffic signal that allows pedestrians to cross on the east side. From an average delay perspective, the chart on the right shows that the overall delay during the PM peak hour for the roundabout will be 23.1, or would be 23.1 with a retail-based Lord and Taylor building, and that would increase to 24.1 seconds with the project.
would just add to that last slide that it highlights how important the connectivity is for walking and biking, and that to really achieve any of that mode share where you do get people not just driving, the town really, it's in the town's interest to improve walking and biking in these areas to the greatest degree possible to make those as most comfortable and safe connections. And that's, to me, what's important about these types of projects.
Yes, it's a holistic view.
Right.
So this intersection, and I do want to emphasize that, you know, we've studied 12 intersections. We're presenting probably 8 in the interest of not using up too much of your time. But we've tried to cover a broad spectrum of the intersections, not just the good ones. This is the intersection of South Avenue with Central Avenue, another busy intersection. We have looked at it extensively, and we propose to install curb extensions and add a no right turn on red sign on the westbound right turn lane so that pedestrians who cross are not confronted with motorists who make a right turn on red and may not see them. We'll be modifying the pedestrian signal timing and upgrading the crosswalks. So overall, the analysis, I would also like to add, in adjusting the signal timing, we have tried to minimize the increases in delay, or show no increases in delay on the eastbound South Avenue right turn movement to Central Avenue, on the northbound left turn movement from Central Avenue onto westbound South Avenue, as we want to encourage motorists of the development to use those movements and not discourage them by having lengthy delays on those movements and have them seek alternative routes. So overall, the analysis indicates that the average delay will increase from almost 38 seconds to 38.5 seconds with the project, a relatively modest increase, and you will get the attendant safety benefits of the traffic signal equipment upgrade.
Hey, John, and either John, I'm not sure who would be best to answer this. I've got some questions regarding Central Avenue, and that did we include the entire length of Central Avenue from Clark all the way through Westfield in this analysis, and why or why not?
So John, I can answer that, or would you like to answer that at this point?
I think we could both speak to
Sure.
it.
So
Or I'll add in.
sure. So when we selected the intersections, we looked at the traffic that would be generated by the project, and we selected the intersections as best we could to anticipate where the project might have impacts. To the south of the site on Central Avenue, the traffic is dispersed somewhat because some of it will go eastbound on South Avenue and then some of it will go southbound on Central. We are in the process of doing a sensitivity analysis to see exactly how much traffic will be added by the project on Central Avenue to the south of the site, or to the south of South Avenue. And based on that, we will be reviewing with the town, and it's possible that we will include an additional intersection, maybe at Park or maybe at Grove, to see what impact the project might have at that location. The reason we did not include it is, in our opinion, we didn't believe the project would have an impact based on a review of the traffic volumes, but it's an issue the public has raised, and we're mindful of the public's comments, and so we're looking into it.
Yeah, I would just echo that the whole process is kind of an iterative, evolving process. So as you learn how the traffic flows spread through the town, how the impact spread, you may need to adjust your analysis accordingly. You start at a certain point, but you kind of have to build out from your model. You can't just jump into the next town. So
and Mayor Brindo, can you?
Yep.
And Mayor Brindo, can you
I'm
speak?
sorry, Carolina, let me just ask, and can you comment on, I know Central Avenue is huge volume. When you mentioned volume, like, do you have any, can you give some context for how much volume is on Central Avenue?
John, do you have the ADT off the top of your head? I think it's over 18,000 AADT vehicles per day. And so in the peak,
Yeah,
translates
something like that.
1,500, I think, in the peak.
I mean, it's a lot. Like if you're saying 18,000 vehicles a day, it's a lot.
1,500
I'm sorry.
goes in one direction, during the PM.
Right. I'm sorry, Carolina.
And Mayor Brindo, I think it's important to emphasize to the public that because of the pilot duration of over 30 years, I should say, the town will have the opportunity also to constantly be revisiting its infrastructure beyond 2027, correct? And so other improvements that might be outside of the vicinity here will definitely be something that the town will be constantly monitor moving forward. If you can speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, well, of course, I think that's absolutely something that we would attempt to do for sure. One other question that has come up, more of a concern raised by, I think, neighbors on the south side, in particular like Boulevard and Summit, which tend to be throughways. I think there's a concern, especially if traffic is going to back up. Are Boulevard and Summit and those streets going to become cut-through streets from people off of Central trying to access the office buildings? Do you see that happening? And if so, what can we do about it?
So as I mentioned previously, we have proposed traffic signal timing changes that will minimize the increase in delays on the eastbound right turn and the northbound left turn movement. The purpose of that is so that people will not divert onto Summit and Boulevard. We would suggest that as the project develops, we consider whether there would be additional measures that we could implement, perhaps traffic calming measures on those streets, such as maybe speed humps or bike lanes that would further discourage motorists from going down Summit and Boulevard. But we're providing the infrastructure with the capacity to accommodate project traffic at the intersection of South and Central. That's the primary focus of the improvements at this location.
Right, correct. I would echo that it's a two-pronged approach. You want to keep the traffic, the main traffic on the arterials and the larger roadways by, as you mentioned, John, making sure the operations are working on those roads. But you want to pair that with, if there's, making sure that you can also put some traffic calming on those streets if you anticipate any kind of diversion of the potential for it. And to that end, in the bike walk plan, we had Summit and Boulevard in the bicycle network as great potential routes for bike routes to the station, so that people from the south neighborhoods would have better access to the train station area and the amenities downtown. And so just by virtue of adding bike lanes on Boulevard and Summit, that helps in the traffic as a traffic calming measure, because it helps narrow the roadway, kind of redefine the roadway so that it doesn't seem as wide. That paired with intersection treatments and other kinds of traffic calming measures could work holistically to try to address any concerns about cut-through traffic.
Okay, thank you. Next we come to the south side of the train station. At the left end, you have a not quite, but similarly complex intersection with Summit Avenue at the train station. The entrance to the train station is a little offset from Summit. The operation of the traffic signal is such that Summit operates under a separate phase from the train station, so you have a limited number of movements running at the same time, which reduces the capacity of the intersection. You also have what I like to refer to as the Westfield Raceway in the westbound direction. You've got two lanes. If you've been stuck behind somebody all the way from Cranford and you're trying to get home in a hurry and you come upon this section, it's your opportunity to zip out behind them, even though you shouldn't, and pass them. So there's a lot of passing and speeding in this location. It's also problematic for the intersection of Boulevard with South Avenue, where there is a pedestrian crosswalk. There are devices, signs with flashing lights installed there to help motorists see that there are pedestrians crossing or waiting to cross, but they are somewhat ineffective because motorists are either blocked from seeing them with somebody on their right, or are too focused on passing somebody out to be watching for flashing signs for pedestrians crossing. So it's proposed to improve the operations at this intersection by reconfiguring, Lisa, if we can move to the next slide, the intersection of Summit Avenue with the train station. So it's a traditional four-way intersection. We can run at the northbound and the southbound movements at the same time, which will provide increased capacity. We can move the stop line up a little bit to get back a second. We're proposing to implement lead pedestrian interval crossings at that location. It'll be a new traffic signal with improved detection and coordination. We're also proposing to install a traffic signal at the east end of the development at location number 6, which will provide a signalized crossing at that location and guaranteed access to South Avenue at that location coming out of the train station. I think it's important to note that access to the facilities, parking garages will be on the back or the top side of the page. So there will be no activity from the development's parking that will be coming out directly onto the street. It's also proposed to close off the exit from the train station parking lot that comes out opposite Boulevard and to tighten up that location so that it will be easier for pedestrians to cross a shorter distance, and pedestrians will no longer have to contend with 2 lanes of westbound traffic. In reviewing this at the previous public comment meetings, we have had residents express concern that the new parking on westbound South Avenue, as well as the elimination of 1 lane, will lead to increased delays because motorists will be either parking or waiting to turn left. We're looking at the possibility of providing left turn lanes potentially. There's not a lot of left turners now, but it's definitely something that we're looking into. We also note that there is currently parking and 1 lane in the eastbound direction on South Avenue, which is really not that different than what's proposed in the westbound direction. From an operational perspective, the analysis indicates on the next slide, Lisa, I forgot about this one, my apologies. This basically is a cross section that just shows you what's known as a road diet. So on the top of the slide, you can see 2 lanes on the left side coming westbound, 1 lane going eastbound, and the parking right next to it. You can see the buildings on the right side and the train station parking on the left side. And then with the road diet on the bottom half of the screen, you can see 1 lane coming east, going westbound, 1 lane going eastbound, and parking lanes on either side.
John, if you don't mind going back to the previous slide for a moment, I think it's worth us staying there a little longer. There are a few other things to highlight here, and John Federico, please chime in. But one, from a property development perspective, just wanted to highlight to folks, I think I've seen some misinformation on the amount of land that we would be acquiring. We would be acquiring the amount of land approximately to what I just drew in the rectangle square, the rectangular polygon. And everything else that you see around this area, including the surface parking that it's here on the north side of the building, is public and will remain publicly managed and operated, including this entire area, which includes the parking garage. As you can see, there are quite a few functions that the team is trying to solve for here. Obviously, functionality of access, of ingress and egress to and from the train station and to the public garage, as well as the private garage. And similar to the north garage that we just mentioned previously, the fact that the team has located the access to all of its garages here, the public ones and the private ones, because we have parking below grade this building and 2 levels of above grade parking behind retail, it happens behind the buildings. And so it gives a huge amount of vehicle queuing capacity without influencing that and putting that onto the street. And John Federico, I don't know if you wanted to comment here.
Yeah, I wanted to add a couple things. It's important to note east of here, coming from central and south, that intersection, that there's 1 westbound lane into this area. So the challenge I've seen in a lot of road diet projects is when you have 2 lanes going in a direction and then you try to road diet down to 1, there's that merge point, and you either have to drop a lane or you have to merge, and that can create a lot of congestion. But entering here, you only have 1 lane that opens up into 2. So when you bring it down to 1, it's 1 lane through. You don't have that merge issue, and that makes us a lot more workable from a road diet perspective. And that's coupled with, as John Canning mentioned, improvements at Summit Avenue in terms of the operations and getting rid of the split phase. Those together with the other signal are really what makes, and having slightly lower volumes here than on North Avenue, what makes, I think, a road diet on this road more feasible.
And to clarify, the road diet team happens within the frame that we can see here, right? It goes back to,
It is, a little bit west of Central to a little bit east of the roundabout.
And let me just say one thing about road diets, because I remember the first time I heard that term, I thought that was really odd. And when you think about it, when it's essentially narrowing the road, and when you provide even visual cues for narrowing the road, it's an automatic kind of incentive to slow down. And I think the thing that I think has always been so troublesome on South Avenue, which is why I think that boulevard flashing beacon isn't necessarily so effective, is, as to something John had already said, is when traffic is going, and if you stop for a pedestrian, the vehicle behind that car will go around to try to pass it, and that's causing pedestrian accidents. So part of the road diet is disabling that get around lane to make sure it's safer for people who are walking.
That
Exactly.
would make the flashing beacon actually operate better in that location.
Yes. And so would the flashing beacon stay? Did you say that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
and John Federico, can, in the previous center, we've had a few folks mention this in terms of how, parallel parking. We know that parallel parking already happens, but can you speak a little bit as to why this wouldn't be the same situation, smacking in the middle of downtown per se, in terms of flow?
In terms of those movements blocking the flow. Yeah, you're gonna have some instances where someone's making a maneuver, but in the overall scheme of things, it's not that many spaces, and that turnover is not going to happen so frequently that it's going to be perceptible as an issue. Most of the time, you're going to be passing a line of parked cars and not even notice.
And the traffic signals will help, right, from establishing that flow.
Right.
Correct?
Correct.
Okay. On the next slide, Lisa, thank you. Just shows you the levels of service. So on the left end, where there is a signal, currently the improvements proposed will reduce the overall delay from 18.8 seconds to 9.5 seconds, which is pretty considerable. At Boulevard, the proposed changes, because we're eliminating the driveway that comes out and makes a right turn opposite Boulevard, and those movements conflict with the left turn, especially during the PM peak hour when people are leaving the train station. The analysis indicates that the delay will be reduced from 40 seconds to 26 seconds. And then at the east end, the delay will be reduced from 22 seconds, which is on the driveway approach, to an overall delay of 6 seconds with the traffic signal. That's for the entire intersection. Again, you get the benefits of signal coordination, and at Boulevard, you get the benefits of more gaps in the traffic flow because you've got the new intersection at intersection number 6 at location number 6. Next slide, Lisa. We'll try and run through this quickly. So in addition to our standard engineering software, which is known as Synchro, where we compare traffic volumes to lane groups and green times, we're also using another format, which is known as Sim Traffic. This is a simulation of future traffic volumes. It allows us to look at how the intersections will operate. On the left side here, this is the intersection of East Broad Street with Mountain Avenue and Central Avenue, where we're proposing significant changes to the signal operation. And on the left side is a future no build condition. On the right side is a future build condition.
And John,
It's run.
John, the no build, just for folks to draw a comparison to the bar charts, is that the red bar or
No,
the
the
yellow
no
bar?
build is the orange,
The orange, okay.
and the build is the blue. And
Okay.
it's difficult to do a quantitative evaluation based on these simulations, but it does give you an indication as to how the intersections operate and how there might be problems. So we do look at this to see if we can sort of double check our analyses. If you want to go to the next slide, Lisa. Thank you. So this is the intersection. Well, actually, it's the intersection of South and North Avenue. I was more focused on South Avenue when this was put together because that's the primary access for the office development. And again, it evaluates the single lane. It actually, when I look at it, I don't see the parking there. So that's something else that we'll have to add and make sure that it's representative of appropriate operating conditions to make sure that the intersections work well. Again, we can use it to help us look at the left turn delays, the impact of the left turn delay. But overall, you can see that traffic operating conditions in the future conditions are moving reasonably well. And that's the intended goal. It's not to speed traffic through Westfield, it's to get traffic through Westfield predictably, efficiently, and smoothly and safely.
And John, just for the public, the animations that you see here and the traffic flows, these are outputs from the model, right? This is
Absolutely.
not someone animating something. This is true data coming that is animated, correct?
Absolutely. There is a, let's call it a button or a tab that you just click, and it takes all of the input data from the model and it turns it from a static model to a dynamic simulation based on all of the algorithms. It's based on the actual data that were in the model. And I think for the most part, those are the highlights of the traffic study. There's a lot in it. It's just been released. It will change. It's going to be reviewed again by WSP. It will be submitted to the town and to the county and to New Jersey Transit. I appreciate everybody's time. It's been an hour and a half listening to me, which is hard enough for me. I can't imagine what it's like for you. I look forward to comments from everybody, and we will be assimilating, compiling them, and responding to them as best we can. And the analysis will change over time. So I'm going to hand it back to whoever's in charge at this point, and thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you so much, John, for that thorough presentation. I'm just going to review some of the I have the conversation, the questions that came in pre this presentation. I think you had addressed many of them. North and Central, what other developments were considered? Let's see, one, you've mentioned the traffic flow on Central and South and North, and what the high volume is. I do think it's one thing to point to how many office employees are we expected to gain and how many are we expected to lose. I do think that's a really important point, because we keep talking about, the Lord & Taylor is gone and we lost the 143,000 square feet of retail and then all the cars and employees that came with that. But we've also, since 2015, lost 250 employees downtown that were working, it's for the last few years prior to 2015, employees that were living or working in second floor buildings in our downtown and parking all up and down Elm Street. And that's been a huge loss. And you ask any of our businesses and they felt that loss. And the other thing, the Lerner David building, the Wells Fargo near the Circle, that one is, they left and they haven't come back. And one of the reasons they left is because they wanted to have upgraded, more Class A amenitized office space. And I spoke to them before they left 5 years ago, I guess it was. And they also needed parking with 155 cars, I remember, for employees. So they're gone. And so it's also important to note that they left, as did the 155 cars at minimum that they had with them. So while we talk about, what's coming, we also have to remember what we've had and tolerated, and not impacted, by the way. Let's see, I'm just going back to a couple other ones. I think somebody asked, they want to know, thank you for clarifying the 70%. I think that there's a 55% thing wasn't going around, 70%. Someone asked, can you provide real world scenarios, like, are we talking about tenants with daily client visits to their offices? And I can just say, on the South Avenue side, client visits like office stuff is not allowed. And strictly for the traffic issues that we mentioned. So, but certainly they were asking like different types of tenants, they had different type of traffic patterns, and do they bring different kind of cars? I think that's something they want to consider. The traffic impact report, someone wants, it's on the website. We mentioned the boulevard, the legitimate concern about cut-throughs on Boulevard and Summit. Let's see. I guess somewhat, this is a question. In your professional opinion, what tolerance or threshold of additional traffic do you believe residential suburban roads should bear? Is that in exchange for residential development? Is there I assume there's like a threshold, right? When you're like, no go. And I know that that's been part of, I think, John, your input process in terms of, like how much, when do you break it? And how do you do that analysis?
So go ahead, John.
If you want to go first, I'll.
Well, I was just going to say that in addition to John as the town's consultant, the state DOT have quite specific guidelines as to what an impact is. It's based on the level, a certain percentage of increase in delay. It's very complicated. It's engineering wonky stuff, but it's very specific to the increase in delay on a movement. And if you are greater than that, then you have to implement measures to bring it down below that. And the county has a similar specified mechanism. So we're bound by those, and I'm sure John in his role will hold us to a similar standard.
Yeah, so what I would say is on an arterial, on a collector, on a major collector, on streets that are kind of meant to move traffic, certainly you don't really look at it as much in terms of the additional cars that you add, because some of them have the capacity to handle that. You look at the operations like we do. How do they perform at intersections? What's the delay? On more residential streets, it is a concern because, as John mentioned earlier, you don't want to divert traffic over to those streets. And part of it is volume, but adding cars is one issue, but speed is the other issue. And I think that's what people really also care about, is not having cars going faster aggressively through their neighborhood when their kids are playing or walking to school or they're out there. So we have to do two things. I mean, we have to look at mitigations that make the main roads function as well as they can to keep traffic on those roads. And then we also have to, where necessary, and the town has done this before on other roads through these little traffic islands and other kinds of diverters, put in traffic calming measures and look at traffic calming where it's needed.
And the one thing that we didn't mention, I think it is worth mentioning, because it's related to parking, but also impacts traffic mitigation. John, you had mentioned how splitting up the north and south side parking will help mitigate people traveling from one side of town to the other to find parking. But the other thing is parking technology enhancements that we are looking to oversee the operations of our parking. And I've always been told that one of the biggest drivers of downtown circulation and traffic is people circling looking for parking spots. And so now there will be technology that you can have an app on your phone and it'll tell you there's 30 spots left in the north garage or 20 spots or various surface parking. And hopefully you can go right to those spots as opposed to circling, wondering where the options are. So it just creates a more efficient parking experience for everybody. So which will also have hopefully a really positive impact on traffic.
And Mayor
Yes.
Brendo, to add to that, the team did not consider those improvements
Correct.
as a part of the traffic data and input assumptions. And the other aspect of this is that all of a sudden, and some people ask, why did you locate the north garage where you did, and then the south garage where you did? And the town conducted research to understand where folks were coming from, where they were using the surface commuter parking lots. And my understanding is that the split is very even. There's about 50% of folks coming from the north side and 50% of folks coming from the south side.
Yeah. So I understand from our Kim that there are really no other like general questions. They are all very specific to intersections, which hopefully we've addressed. This will obviously this presentation will live on the town's page, and hopefully your presentation is also going to be posted on the One Westfield place. And then just the one thing that I want to remind everybody is that A lot of these problematic intersections are things that have been identified as problems prior to this development. And John Federico, you've seen it more than anybody, and the bike ped plan and our master plan reacts. We all know where the intersections are. What this project does is give us the means to be able to resolve and mitigate many of these long-standing traffic issues that we really couldn't anticipate doing any for the foreseeable future, and certainly not all at once. Doing one is tend to be a really big deal. So being able to look at these holistically and plan for them as part of the project, and one of the things that the pilot agreement will enable is a significant improvement of quality of life in many measures, but not to deny that there will be increased traffic from this project, but we have the opportunity to mitigate it all and more in a way that we haven't been able to previously. So with that, I don't see any further questions. I would encourage everybody to continue to submit questions, info@onewestfieldplace.com. We will continue to update the FAQs, and we'll notify you when we do, when there's new information and so forth coming out. And again, I look forward to everybody coming to the, Future of Office again tomorrow at 6 o'clock, planning and design, discussion of use. That's on Thursday at 6 o'clock, and Wednesday, on Monday is wellness and sustainability. All of them will be taped, and you can watch. We'll be doing Facebook Lives on all of those as well, probably right after the new year. So thank you all for your participation, and thank you to everyone who tuned in tonight. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.